The crystal chandeliers above the grand ballroom of the Meridian Hotel cast fractured light across 200 faces. Executives, board members, their spouses arranged in careful hierarchies at round tables draped in ivory linen. Victoria Chen sat at table 7, not table 1 where the C-suite gathered, not even table 3 where senior management preened. Table 7, the wives' table. She wore navy blue. Simple. A dress her husband Marcus had glanced at for half a second that morning before returning to his phone. Fine, he'd said. Not, you look beautiful. Not even, that works. Just, fine. Around her, the other spouses, all women, all married to men 2 tax brackets above them, picked at seared scallops and made conversation that floated like smoke, insubstantial and fleeting. How do you spend your days, Victoria? Asked Diane, whose husband ran operations. The question had teeth hidden in it. I read. I manage the household. I... Must be nice, Diane interrupted, her smile sharp as a paper cut. All that free time? Victoria's fingers tightened on her wineglass. Free time. As if the last 12 years had been a vacation, as if building an empire from shadows was leisure. At table 1, Marcus threw his head back laughing at something Gerald Hawthorne, the CEO, had said. The sound carried across the room like a victory bell. Her husband, 42 years old, Chief Innovation Officer, 1 promotion away from the C-suite. Everyone said he was brilliant, a visionary, self-made. Everyone said that. Victoria took a long sip of Chateauneuf du Pape and let the lie settle in her throat like acid. The humiliation began during dessert. Gerald Hawthorne stood at the microphone, his silver hair catching the light like a crown. Before we wrap up this evening, I want to recognize some outstanding achievements. He listed names, accomplishments, stock options. The room erupted in applause after each one. And of course, Gerald continued, his voice warming with affection, none of these men would be here without the support of their better halves, the women who keep the home fires burning while we change the world. Polite laughter rippled through the ballroom. Victoria's jaw clenched. Speaking of which, Gerald's eyes landed on table 7, on her. Victoria Chen is over there. Marcus, your wife is looking lovely tonight. You're a lucky man. Marcus stood, grinning, playing to the crowd. I really am, Gerald. Though I have to say she's lucky too. Not everyone gets to shop and have lunch while her husband builds the future. The room exploded with laughter. Victoria's face remained perfectly still. Inside, something old and cold began to shift, like ice cracking on a frozen lake. That's generous of you, Marcus, called out Richard Santos from table 2, his voice carrying the particular cruelty of alcohol and confidence. My wife keeps asking for an allowance increase. I keep telling her, honey, money doesn't grow on trees. Someone has to actually earn it. More laughter. Harder now. Meaner. At least your wife asks, someone else shouted. Mine just spends and expects me to figure it out. Victoria felt the weight of 200 gazes, some pitying, most amused. The wives at her table had gone silent, eyes on their dessert plates, complicit in their own diminishment. Marcus was still standing, still smiling his boardroom smile. In all seriousness, he said, I'm grateful Victoria is content with her role. Not every woman is cut out for the corporate world. It takes a certain killer instinct. He said it kindly, lovingly even. That made it worse. Gerald raised his glass. To the women who support us, we couldn't do it without you. To the wives, the room chorused. Victoria didn't lift her glass. She looked at Marcus, really looked at him, across the expanse of the ballroom. At the man she'd married 13 years ago when he'd been a junior analyst with brilliant ideas and no capital. At the man who'd pitched her his vision over cheap wine in their studio apartment, eyes blazing with possibility. At the man who'd said, I just need a chance. One real chance. She'd given him that chance. She'd given him everything. And he'd forgotten. Victoria set down her wineglass with infinite care. She stood. The room's attention was already fracturing. People turning back to their conversations, the moment of mockery passing like weather. She walked. Not toward the exit, toward table 1. Her heels clicked against marble with the precision of a countdown. Conversations faltered as she passed. By the time she reached the front of the room, silence had spread like spilled ink. Gerald Hawthorne looked at her with mild confusion. "Victoria, is everything—" "I need to borrow the microphone," she said. Her voice was calm, steady, the voice she used in board meetings no one here knew she attended. Gerald hesitated, then stepped aside with a patronizing chuckle. "Of course, though I'm not sure we have time for—" She took the microphone from his hand. 200 faces turned toward her. Marcus's expression flickered between confusion and something that might have been concern, or maybe embarrassment. Victoria looked out at the room, at the men who'd built their careers on her capital, at the wives who had accepted their assigned roles, at the world that had decided who she was without ever asking. "My name is Victoria Chen, but some of you know me better as VC Greystone." The silence deepened, became absolute. 12 years ago, I liquidated a trust fund my grandmother left me, $42 million. I used it to establish Greystone Capital, a private equity firm specializing in strategic investments in high-growth tech companies. Marcus had gone very still. Greystone Capital currently holds a 67% controlling stake in Helix Innovations. This company, your company. Someone's fork clattered against a plate. Every funding round you've celebrated, every expansion you've executed, every acquisition that's made headlines, I approved it. Every single one. Through a network of shell corporations and proxy votes, I have maintained absolute control over the strategic direction of this company, while remaining completely invisible. Gerald Hawthorne's face had drained of color. That's not possible. Our majority stakeholder is a Cayman Islands holding company called Meridian Ventures, which is wholly owned by Greystone Capital, which is wholly owned by me. Victoria's voice never wavered. I have the documentation with me, if you'd like to see it. I also have 12 years of board minutes, financial records, and email chains that I think might interest the SEC. The room had become a tableau, frozen, disbelieving. Victoria turned to her husband. "Marcus, when you pitched me your idea for predictive analytics software in 2013, I believed in you. I gave you seed funding, not a loan, a gift. $2 million to build your prototype. When you needed Series A funding, I arranged it through Greystone. When you wanted to expand into Europe, I approved the capital. Every promotion you've received, every stock option, every bonus, I enabled it." Marcus opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "You asked me once why I was content being a housewife, why I didn't have ambitions of my own." She smiled, and it was terrible. "I was never content. I was strategic. I built an empire in the shadows while you built a career in the spotlight. I let you believe you were self-made because it served my purposes to remain invisible. But tonight," her voice hardened, "tonight, you made me visible in exactly the wrong way." She turned back to the room. "Effective immediately, I'm calling for a full financial audit of Helix Innovations. I want every expense account examined, every contract reviewed, every executive perk justified. I've been a passive investor for too long. That ends now." Richard Santos stood up, his face flushed. "You can't just— This is insane. You're his wife. There are conflict of interest. Sit down, Richard." Victoria's voice cracked like a whip. "Or I'll have security escort you out of a building I own." He sat. "I've tolerated a culture of mediocrity and entitlement because I believed the company was healthy enough to absorb it. I was wrong. This company has become a boys' club where success is measured in golf handicaps and whose wife complains the least. That ends tonight." She looked at Gerald Hawthorne. "Gerald, you've been CEO for 8 years. In that time, revenue has grown 12% while the industry average is 34%. You've prioritized comfort over innovation, loyalty over competence. I want your resignation on my desk by Friday." Gerald's mouth worked silently. "Then, you can't— The board— I am the board, Gerald. I control 67% of the votes. I am the only vote that matters. The weight of that truth settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Victoria's gaze swept across table 1. Most of you will survive this transition. Some of you won't. The audit will determine who's been earning their compensation and who's been coasting on proximity to power. She found Marcus in the crowd. He was staring at her like she was a stranger. Maybe she always had.
I'm not doing this out of revenge, she said, softer now. I'm doing this because I built something extraordinary, and I've watched you all treat it like a playground. I'm done watching. She set the microphone down on Gerald's table with a soft thud. Then she walked out of the ballroom, her heels clicking against marble, leaving behind 200 people who'd just discovered the woman they dismissed had been the one holding their futures in her hands all along. The audit began Monday morning. Victoria arrived at Helix Innovations at 7 a.m., 45 minutes before anyone else. She'd never set foot in the building before, had deliberately avoided it, maintaining the fiction of separation. Now she walked through the glass doors of the lobby like she owned them, because she did. The security guard looked up, startled. "Ma'am, can I help?" "No, you won't." She pulled out her phone, opened an encrypted app, and showed him a screen. "I'm the majority shareholder. I have access to every floor, every office, every file cabinet in this building. Are we clear?" The guard's eyes widened. "Yes, ma'am." She took the elevator to the 12th floor, executive row. Corner offices with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. She'd approved the renovation budget 3 years ago, $14 million for Italian marble and ergonomic furniture. She wondered if it had been worth it. Gerald's office door was closed. She opened it anyway. He was already there, sitting at his desk like a man waiting for execution. He looked up when she entered, and she saw the exhaustion in his face. He'd probably been there all night. "Victoria." "Gerald." A long silence. "I built this company," he said finally. 20 years of my life. "No." Her voice was gentle, but inflexible. "Marcus built this company. I funded it. You managed it. And lately, you've been managing it into comfortable stagnation. We're profitable. We're stable. Stable is another word for dying. The tech industry doesn't reward stability. It rewards disruption, innovation, risk. You've spent 8 years protecting what we have instead of building what we could be." Gerald's hands clenched on his desk. "So, that's it? 30 years in this industry and I'm out because I didn't grow fast enough?" "You're out because you created a culture where competence matters less than likability, where women are decorative accessories, where my husband felt comfortable publicly mocking me in front of 200 people because that's the example you set. You called us better halves. You toasted to the wives who keep the home fires burning. You reduced us to supporting characters in your stories." Victoria leaned forward. "I want a resignation letter by Friday. I'll provide a generous severance package, 2 years of salary, full benefits, and a glowing reference. But you're done here." Gerald stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "You're not what I expected." No one ever expects the housewife to be the power behind the throne. She stood. That's the point. The audit uncovered rot. Not everywhere. The engineering teams were clean. Brilliant people doing extraordinary work. The product division was innovative, hungry, excellent. But the upper management layer had calcified into something toxic. Expense accounts showed $340,000 in golf club memberships, $180,000 in client entertainment at strip clubs, $220,000 in luxury box seats at sporting events. Richard Santos had billed the company $47,000 for a team building retreat to Vegas that included no team building and mostly involved blackjack. Marcus's expense account was cleaner than most, but not clean. $18,000 in dry cleaning last year, $62,000 in business class flights when economy would have sufficed. A company card used to buy jewelry, client gifts, the receipts claimed, that Victoria had never seen him give to anyone. She sat in the conference room on Wednesday, surrounded by 3 forensic accountants and a corporate attorney, and felt the weight of her own willful blindness. "There's more," said Jennifer Park, the lead accountant. She slid a folder across the table. Contracts with vendors that don't seem to exist. Consulting fees paid to LLCs with no employees. We're talking about roughly $2.3 million in potential fraud over the last 3 years. Victoria opened the folder. The first page listed a company called Apex Solutions Consulting. Monthly payments of $50,000 for strategic advisory services. She'd never approved this, had never even heard of them. Who authorized these payments? Gerald Hawthorne and Marcus Chen, co-signed. The floor dropped out from under her. "Marcus, dig deeper," she said, her voice hollow. "I want to know where that money went." She found Marcus in his office Thursday evening. He was packing his things into a cardboard box. Awards, photos, a glass paperweight she'd given him for their 5th anniversary. He looked up when she entered. "Come to watch the execution? Come to understand why." He laughed bitterly. "Why what? Why I didn't tell you that you were funding my entire career? Why I let people think I was self-made? Jesus, Victoria, how would that have looked? Hi, I'm Marcus Chen, and my wife's money bought my success. I'd be a joke. Instead, you made me one." The words hung between them like broken glass. Marcus set down the paperweight carefully. "I didn't know about Greystone, about the 67%. You hid it from me. I trusted you to love me regardless, to respect me regardless." Victoria moved deeper into the office. "Tell me about Apex Solutions." His face went gray. $50,000 a month for 3 years. $1.8 million. Money that came out of the company budget. My company, without authorization. Where did it go, Marcus? It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. A long silence. Outside the window, the city glittered with evening lights. "I needed to look successful," he said finally. "Appearances matter in this industry. The right car, the right watch, the right house. I was living on a corporate salary while competing with people who had family money, who had what I had." Yes, the admission seemed to cost him something. "You had generational wealth, and I had student loans and immigrant parents who worked themselves to death so I could go to MIT. I needed to project success to achieve success. So I created a consulting company, paid myself through it, and used the money to maintain the lifestyle that would get me taken seriously." Victoria absorbed this. "You embezzled from a company I own to keep up with people who wouldn't exist without me funding them? I was going to pay it back. When? After the next promotion I approved? The next stock option I granted?" Her voice was sharp as a scalpel. "You stole from me, Marcus. From our future. From the company I built. You built it with your grandmother's money. You didn't earn it." The words hit her like a slap. "I didn't earn it?" she repeated slowly. "I inherited capital and then spent 12 years turning 42 million into 600 million through strategic investments, market analysis, and financial engineering. But you're right, Marcus. I didn't earn it. I just got lucky." The sarcasm was acid. Marcus's shoulders slumped. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." She turned toward the door. "The board meeting is tomorrow at 9. I'll be there. You won't." "Victoria, you're fired, Marcus. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out when you're finished packing." She didn't look back. The board meeting was an execution. Gerald Hawthorne presented his resignation first, reading from a prepared statement with quiet dignity. The board members, 5 external members Victoria had allowed to maintain the illusion of distributed power, accepted it with murmured condolences. Then Victoria stood. "I'm appointing a new CEO, Amelia Foster." The room erupted. "Amelia Foster is a product manager. She's not—" She doesn't have the experience. Amelia Foster has an MBA from Stanford, 12 years of product experience, and a track record of launching every successful product this company has released in the last 5 years. She's brilliant, strategic, and capable. More importantly, she understands what this company is supposed to be: innovative, disruptive, and merit-based. But she's a woman. Yes, so am I. And I own 67% of this company, which means my vote is the only one that matters. Amelia Foster is the new CEO. Discussion closed. She looked around the table at 5 men who'd grown comfortable in their board seats, collecting fees for quarterly meetings and rubber stamping decisions. I'm also restructuring the board. 2 of you will be retained. 3 will be replaced with individuals who understand modern corporate governance and aren't afraid of a female CEO. She slid folders across the table. Inside, you'll find evaluations of your performance over the last 3 years. If your folder is blue, you're staying. If it's red, you have 30 days. 3 red folders, 2 blue. The meeting ended in stunned silence.
Amelia Foster was 41, whip-smart, and had been passed over for promotion twice in favor of men with half her competence. She sat across from Victoria in the executive conference room, looking shell-shocked. "I don't understand," she said. "Why me?" "Because you're excellent. Because you've been overlooked. Because I've been reviewing personnel files for a week and your performance reviews are glowing while your promotion trajectory is flat." Victoria leaned back. "Because you deserve it. The company is in crisis. The CEO just resigned. We're facing an SEC inquiry over the expense account fraud. The leadership team is in chaos." "I know. That's why I need someone who can handle chaos." Victoria smiled. "The question is, can you?" Amelia was quiet for a moment. Then, "What do you need from me?" "Transparency, meritocracy, a culture where the best ideas win regardless of who presents them. I want you to clean house, not vindictively, but strategically. Keep the people who make us better. Let go of the people who coast on relationships." "That's gonna make me unpopular." "Good. Popularity is how we got here." Victoria slid a document across the table. "This is your compensation package. Base salary of $850,000, stock options that vest over 4 years, performance bonuses tied to revenue growth and culture metrics." Amelia's eyes widened at the numbers. "I'm also establishing a new division, strategic inclusion. Its job is to identify and develop talent that's been overlooked: women, minorities, anyone who's brilliant but invisible. I want you to find them and give them opportunities." "You're rebuilding the entire company." "I'm revealing what it should have been all along." Victoria stood. "Do you want the job?" Amelia looked at her for a long moment. Then she stood and extended her hand. "Yes." They shook. "Good. You start Monday. First order of business: fire everyone involved in the Apex Solutions fraud. No exceptions, including Marcus Chen." Victoria's expression didn't change. "Especially Marcus Chen." The divorce papers arrived at Marcus's apartment on a Tuesday. Victoria didn't deliver them herself. She had a process server do it, clinical and impersonal. By then, she'd moved out of their home, the 5-bedroom colonial in Westchester that Marcus's embezzled money had helped purchase, and into a penthouse she'd owned for 6 years through another shell company. She'd always had an exit strategy. Marcus called her 47 times that day. She didn't answer. On the 48th call, she picked up. "Victoria, please, we can work through this." "No, we can't." "I made mistakes, I know that. But we've been together for 13 years. That has to count for something." It did count for something. It counted for everything. Her voice was quiet, tired. "That's why it hurts. I love you. You loved the version of me that made you feel successful, the housewife who didn't threaten you, the woman who existed in your shadow." She paused. "You never loved the woman who built the stage you were standing on." "That's not fair. None of this is fair, Marcus. That's the point." She hung up. 6 months later, Helix Innovations reported record quarterly revenue. Amelia Foster had restructured the executive team, promoted 3 women and 2 men from within, and launched a product line that analysts were calling the most innovative development in predictive analytics in a decade. The stock price had climbed 34%. The SEC investigation had concluded with settlements and fines, but no criminal charges. The board had been reconstituted with 7 members, 4 women, 3 men, who actually read the quarterly reports and asked hard questions. Victoria attended every board meeting now, sitting at the head of the table without apology. She was no longer invisible. On a Thursday in June, she stood in the same ballroom where she'd been humiliated and announced the creation of the Phoenix Fund, a $20 million initiative to support women whose careers had been interrupted, overlooked, or undermined. This fund is for the housewives who were told they didn't have ambition, for women who were passed over for promotion, for the mothers who were pushed out, for everyone who was told they weren't enough. The room erupted in applause. Afterwards, a young woman approached her, maybe 25, nervous, brilliant eyes. "Miss Chen, I just wanted to say, your story changed my life. I was about to quit my job because my boss kept taking credit for my work, but after I heard what you did, I reported him to HR. They fired him. I got promoted." She took the woman's hand. "What's your name?"
Sarah Kim. Sarah, the world is going to tell you to be smaller, quieter, more accommodating. Victoria held her gaze. Don't listen. Be extraordinary. Be undeniable. And when they try to make you invisible, make them see you. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Victoria watched her walk away and felt something shift in her chest. Not closure was too simple, but something like purpose, like validation. She'd spent 12 years in the shadows building power. Now she stood in the light, wielding it. On the 1-year anniversary of the dinner, Victoria returned to the Meridian Hotel. Not for a corporate event, for herself. She sat at the hotel bar, ordered a glass of Chateauneuf du Pape, and looked out at the ballroom where her life had fractured and reformed. The bartender set down her wine. Celebrating something? Victoria smiled. A reckoning. She raised her glass to the empty room, to the woman she'd been and the woman she'd become, to the empire she'd built in secret and claimed in public. To visibility, she whispered, and drank. Outside, the city glittered with 1,000 lights, each one a life, a story, a woman who'd been told she was less than she was. Victoria Chen had been that woman once. She never would be again. 3 years after the reckoning, Victoria Chen sat in a television studio in Manhattan, waiting for the cameras to go live. The makeup artist had finished 10 minutes ago, leaving her face camera-ready, but still recognizably herself. No mask, no pretense. She'd learned the power of being exactly who she was. 60 seconds, Miss Chen, the producer said. Across from her, Samantha Reed, the host of Breaking Ground, the country's most watched business interview show, shuffled her notes. Samantha had built her career on asking the questions other journalists were afraid to voice. Victoria wasn't afraid anymore. The lights brightened, the camera's red eye blinked to life. Good evening. I'm Samantha Reed, and tonight we have a remarkable guest. Victoria Chen became a household name 3 years ago when she revealed herself as the secret majority shareholder of Helix Innovations, a revelation that came immediately after being publicly humiliated at a corporate dinner. Since then, she's transformed not just one company, but an entire conversation about power, visibility, and who gets to hold it. Victoria, thank you for being here. Thank you for having me. Let's start with the obvious question. Why did you stay invisible for so long? Victoria had been asked this 1,000 times. The answer never got easier. Because I was taught that power is masculine, that women who seek it are aggressive, threatening, unnatural. She paused. I had $42 million and a vision, but I didn't have permission, not from society, not even from myself, to be the public face of that vision. So I built from the shadows. I told myself I was being strategic. Really, I was being afraid. And your husband never knew. The question still stung even after 3 years. Marcus knew I had family money. He knew I'd helped him get started.
But I never told him the full extent of it, that I owned the company, that I controlled his career, that every success he celebrated was built on infrastructure I had created. Victoria met Samantha's eyes. I thought I was protecting him, protecting us. I was really protecting a fiction that was destroying us both. You've said in previous interviews that the humiliation at that dinner was a gift. Can you explain that? Victoria laughed softly. It was the worst gift I've ever received. But yes, a gift. Because it forced me to choose. I could stay invisible and safe, or I could step into the light and claim what I'd built. The humiliation made the choice for me. And now, Helix Innovations has tripled its revenue under Amelia Foster's leadership. The Phoenix Fund has distributed over $60 million to support women's careers. You're on the cover of Fortune, Forbes, Bloomberg Businessweek. Was it worth it? Victoria considered this. The divorce was devastating. The public exposure was brutal. I lost friends, family members who thought I was being vindictive or power-hungry. For 6 months, I couldn't sleep without medication. So, was it worth it? She smiled. Ask me again in the context of the 2,000 women who've received Phoenix Fund grants. Ask the female executives at Helix who were promoted based on merit, instead of being passed over for golf buddies. Ask my daughter.
Samantha's eyebrows rose. Your daughter? This is the first time you've mentioned having a child. Because she deserves privacy. But yes, I have a 9-year-old daughter, Emma. Victoria's voice softened. For the first 8 years of her life, she watched me pretend to be smaller than I was. She internalized that, started making herself smaller too. After the reckoning, after I stepped into my power publicly, she asked me, Mommy, were you lying before, or are you lying now? The studio was silent. I told her I'd been hiding, that I'd been afraid people wouldn't love me if they knew how powerful I was. And she said, Victoria's voice caught. She said, but I would have loved you more. Samantha leaned forward. How did that change things for you? It clarified everything. I wasn't just building companies or funding women's careers. I was modeling for my daughter what a woman can be. And if I stayed invisible, I was teaching her to hide too. Let's talk about Marcus. Your ex-husband has been relatively quiet since the divorce, but he did give one interview where he claimed you'd weaponized your wealth against him. How do you respond to that? Victoria had known this question was coming. She'd prepared for it. Marcus is entitled to his narrative, but here are the facts. I gave him $2 million in seed funding with no expectation of repayment. I facilitated every funding round that built his career. When I discovered he'd embezzled $1.8 million through a fake consulting company, I could have had him prosecuted. Instead, I fired him and let him keep his reputation relatively intact. I paused. If that's weaponizing wealth, then I'm guilty. But I think most people would call it consequences. Do you regret marrying him? No. The answer surprised even Victoria. I regret hiding from him. I regret not trusting him with the truth. But I don't regret the marriage. It taught me who I was and who I refused to be. Samantha leaned forward. You've become something of an icon to a certain generation of women, but you also have critics. Some say you're simply a wealthy woman using her privilege to rewrite the rules in her favor, that the Phoenix Fund is performative rather than transformative. What do you say to them? I say they're partially right. I am wealthy. I do have privilege. And yes, I'm using it to rewrite rules that were never designed to include women like me, or women with far less privilege. But performative? The 2,000 women who've received grants, the 300 who've been hired into executive positions, the 47 companies that have adopted our transparency standards, they're not performing. They're living different lives because the rules changed. And the criticism that you're just one woman, that individual success stories don't change systems. Correct. One woman doesn't change systems. That's why I'm not acting alone. The Phoenix Fund is partnering with 63 companies to implement merit-based promotion tracking. We're funding research into bias in performance reviews. We're supporting legislation for pay transparency. Individual success is a starting point,
not an ending point. Samantha smiled. You sound like you're running for office. I'm not, but I am running something. A long-term strategy to make invisible women visible, to make powerful women acceptable, to make the next generation of Emmas believe they can be extraordinary without apologizing for it. The interview continued for another 20 minutes, but that moment, that crystallization of purpose, was what went viral. By the next morning, #MakeThemSeeYou was trending worldwide. Victoria stood in her office on the 47th floor of a building she'd purchased 2 years earlier, looking out at the city that had once seemed impenetrable. Her phone buzzed, a text from Amelia Foster. Board meeting went well. Q3 projections are exceeding targets. Also, Elena Rodriguez from engineering just pitched an idea that's going to change everything, promoting her to VP of Innovation. Thought you'd want to know. Victoria smiled. Elena Rodriguez, 29 years old, brilliant, Latina. Someone who would have been overlooked in the old Helix. Not anymore. Another text, this one from an unknown number. Ms. Chen, I don't know you, but I wanted to thank you. I'm a single mother who lost my marketing career after having my son. The Phoenix Fund gave me a grant to get certified in digital marketing. I just accepted a director position at a Fortune 500 company. I start Monday. You changed my life.
Victoria read it twice, then saved it in a folder labeled Why. She had hundreds of messages like it. On the worst days, and there were still worse days, when the loneliness of her choices felt crushing, she read them and remembered. The reckoning hadn't just been about claiming power, it had been about using it. Her assistant knocked. Miss Chen, your daughter's school called. Emma's science project won first place at the regional competition. Victoria's heart swelled. What was her project? Something about invisible forces shaping visible outcomes. The teacher said it was remarkably sophisticated for a 9-year-old. Victoria laughed. Of course it was. She gathered her things and headed for the door. There would be more board meetings, more interviews, more battles to fight in boardrooms and courtrooms and legislative chambers. But right now, there was a 9-year-old girl who'd won a science competition and needed her mother to celebrate with her. Victoria Chen, billionaire, majority shareholder, destroyer of glass ceilings, left the office early to pick up her daughter. Some revolutions happen in ballrooms under crystal chandeliers. Others happened in homework folders and dinner conversations and bedtime stories about women who refused to stay invisible. Victoria was building both, and she was just getting started.